On January 9th, 2000, a 12-year-old kid looked directly into the camera, sighed, and started talking to you like you'd known each other forever. No laugh track, no studio audience. Just a kid, a camera, and a family so loudly, gloriously broken that 23 million Americans immediately felt seen. Nobody realized it at the time, but what they were watching would sneakily become one of the most influential shows of the 21st century, quietly shaping 2 decades of Emmy winners in ways that, when you lay it all out, are actually kind of insane. This is the rise, the fall, and the underrated legacy of Malcolm in the Middle. But first, like this video if you still know the words to the theme song, and subscribe for more retro TV deep dives. Okay, let's rewind to 1999, a time where every show kinda looked the same. Friends, Everybody Loves Raymond, Will and Grace, Dharma and Greg, every single one of them is shot the exact same way. Multiple cameras, a live studio audience, and a laugh track that tells you exactly when to think something is funny. That had been the format for family sitcoms for 50 years, and nobody was seriously challenging it on a major network in prime time. Enter Linwood Boomer. If the name doesn't ring a bell, his face might. Boomer spent the late 70s and early 80s on Little House on the Prairie as Adam Kendall, Mary's blind husband. He acted his way through a chunk of that era, then quietly transitioned into writing and producing, grinding away on shows like Night Court and Third Rock from the Sun. Not exactly a household name, but he was respected, and the guy could write. And he had a story he couldn't get out of his head. Boomer grew up as the third of 4 children. His mother occasionally walked around the house naked. His father once ripped up the entire front lawn and replaced it with gravel because he didn't want to mow it anymore. He himself had been tested as a kid and placed in the gifted class, which didn't make him popular. It made him a target. He was too smart for the regular kids and too weird for everybody else. He was, as the title would one day announce, stuck in the middle. He'd been telling these stories at Hollywood pitch meetings for years, not as pitches, just as conversation. And he was apparently fantastic at it because his agent eventually called him and said, "You know what? Executives keep telling me how much they love meeting with you. You make them laugh. You should write a pilot about your family." So Boomer went home and wrote what he thought was just a writing sample. He accidentally changed television. The pilot script made the rounds and landed at UPN first. They were interested enough to develop it for the 1998-99 season, but then they passed. Now, that typically means game over. A lot of great pilots of shows you've never heard of die at step 1. But a producer named Gail Berman saw what UPN had missed. She was the president of Regency Television at the time, and she saw the potential. She developed the script and eventually pitched it to Fox, who gave it the green light. Now came the hard part, making it. And what made Malcolm hard was that the idea was somewhat radical. No laugh track, no studio audience, no multi-camera setup. The show would be shot on film like a movie with a single camera, cinematic angles, fast cuts. And if they weren't already breaking enough rules, there'd be a 12-year-old kid breaking the fourth wall to talk directly to the audience in a way that network sitcoms simply did not do. Director Todd Holland came in to shoot the pilot. He and Boomer were on the same page. This was not going to look like a typical sitcom. It was going to look like a chaotic, beautiful live-action cartoon. Now they needed to find the right actors to bring their chaotic vision to life. Frankie Muniz was 13 years old when he auditioned for Malcolm, and he was actually annoyed about it. He had a Pizza Hut commercial audition on the same day, and as far as he was concerned, that was the bigger deal. He rushed into the audition, ran his lines with barely contained impatience, and walked out. The producers watched him do it and thought, "That's the kid." They cast him on the spot. Jane Kaczmarek was Lois from the beginning. She brought operatic intensity to a role that could have been a cartoon villain, exhausted, loud, but loving. For Hal, the father, Boomer had written someone a lot different than the character you remember. Someone who was checked out and trying to disappear into the background of his own family. The character was basically a ghost. And then Bryan Cranston walked in. Get this, he didn't get the role until literally hours before the pilot started filming. And he didn't play the character as written. He played Hal as a man-child, enthusiastic and terrified, someone who'd loved his family desperately and had absolutely no idea what to do with any of them. He was physically committed in a way that took everyone, including Boomer, by surprise, to the point where he laughed so hard he literally fell out of his chair. So Hal was rewritten around what Cranston did in that room. He became the emotional engine of the entire show. If Cranston plays the original character as written, the show is completely different. And by different, I mean much, much worse. For Francis, the delinquent older brother shipped off to military school, a young actor you may have heard of desperately wanted the role. Aaron Paul read the pilot script, wanted it badly, but the producers kept passing on him, and Christopher Masterson got the role instead. Aaron Paul later joked it probably saved his career for something bigger. And yeah, he wasn't wrong. Justin Burfield and Eric Persullivan were cast as Reese and Dewey respectively, the remaining brothers, rounding out the most aggressively dysfunctional family Fox had ever put on the air. Well, I don't know, Married with Children might have something to say about that. Anyway, the family's surname was originally Wilkerson in the pilot script, visible on Francis's military school uniform, but Boomer later decided to keep the name a secret to keep the family as universal as possible. It became one of the show's running jokes. In the series finale, as Malcolm is introduced for his graduation speech, a microphone screeches over his last name, and Francis's employee badge in the background simply says no last name. Malcolm in the Middle premiered on January 9th, 2000 after The Simpsons. 23 million people watched the first episode, 26 million watched the second. Those are Fox's biggest ratings for a new show since The Simpsons debuted a decade earlier, and critics loved it. Metacritic gave the first season an 88 out of 100. The New York Times called it a sensation. And audiences experienced something they hadn't experienced in a long time watching a family sitcom. They saw themselves. Family life is chaotic and occasionally humiliating. Some would even say life is unfair. Yep, the whole philosophy was right there in the They Might Be Giants theme song that, fun fact, would go on to win a Grammy. In season 1, the show finished ranked 18th in the country with 15.2 million average viewers. Season 2 pulled in 14.5 million average viewers. Season 3 held at 13 million. For Fox, Malcolm in the Middle was a godsend. And the next part in this video is a big difference from a lot of shows I cover on this channel. Behind the scenes, production was remarkably clean. No massive cast explosions, no showrunner warfare, no network trying to turn it into something it wasn't. Boomer ran a tight ship, and Fox largely let him work his magic. I mean, if you want some drama, Frankie Muniz had mentioned in recent years that he once walked off the set during production because he felt certain people were creating a toxic atmosphere. He said he missed 2 episodes, but the issues eventually got resolved. Obla-di, obla-da, life goes on. But for all of you drama lovers out there, the network did end up making decisions that ultimately derailed the show. They kept moving it around. Sundays at 8:30, then Wednesdays, then back to Sundays, then Sundays at 9, then Sundays at 7:30, then Fridays at 8:30, then back to Sundays at 7. It's hard to maintain and grow a loyal audience when your network can't decide when to put you on. And the ratings slide ensued. Season 4 averaged 10.7 million viewers, ranked 43rd. Season 5 dropped to 8.4 million viewers, ranked 71st. Season 6 fell to 5.6 million viewers and ranked 99th in the country. Season 7, the final season, barely cleared 3.8 million viewers and ranked 127th in the country. Ouch. The series finale, Graduation, aired May 14th, 2006. 7.4 million people watched it, a nice bump in the ratings for a show that had been fading, though still a far cry from its early days. Malcolm graduated, got into Harvard, and took a job as a janitor to pay for it. Lois explained, covered in garbage from an exploded vat of the worst substance Reese could concoct, that his whole hard life had been preparation, that he'd one day be in a position to care about people nobody else in power ever cared about, that the suffering was the point. It was actually a beautiful ending to a show that had quietly become something much bigger than anyone noticed while it was happening. Now here's something that will drive you absolutely nuts before I get into the insane legacy. In 7 seasons, Jane Kaczmarek was nominated for the Emmy for Outstanding Lead Actress in a Comedy Series every single year, and she never won. Bryan Cranston got 3 supporting actor nominations, never won. Frankie Muniz got 1 lead actor nomination, never won. The show itself won 7 Emmys over its run, but somehow across 7 seasons, the Academy could not find it in their hearts to give a single acting award to the core cast. The only actor on the show who actually won was the legendary Cloris Leachman, who won 2 Emmys for her incredible guest role as Grandma Ida. As they say, life is unfair. And while after 151 episodes and 7 seasons on one of the most popular shows on TV, you'd think the cast would be destined for big things, but for most of them, Malcolm was their peak popularity and in some cases the end of their career. Jane Kaczmarek got gigs, she continued working steadily in television and film, both guest spots and recurring roles, but nothing like Malcolm. Frankie Muniz stepped back from acting almost entirely. He got into racing and music, he moved on, built a different life, and seemed genuinely at peace with it. Justin Burfield went on to co-found Virgin Produced in 2010, the film and television production arm of the Virgin Group. Eric Persullivan, Dewey, retired from acting in 2010, focusing on education instead and has stayed out of the spotlight. The big breakout star, of course, was Bryan Cranston. In 2008, 2 years after Malcolm ended, he was cast as Walter White in Breaking Bad. The show specifically sought him out because of what he'd done with Hal. The producers had watched Malcolm in the Middle and recognized something in Cranston that most of Hollywood had missed. This man could do anything. The physical comedy, the desperate love, the complete emotional commitment to whatever the scene required. The guy who had been covered in bees and befriended a group of bodybuilders and skated magnificently to We Are the Champions became one of the most terrifying and complex antiheroes in television history. You don't get Heisenberg without Hal, the character who was cast just hours before the pilot. But the show's legacy goes far beyond Walter White. In 2000, when Malcolm premiered, the multi-camera laugh-track sitcom was still the dominant format for family comedies on network television. It had been dominant for 50 years. It was inevitable. Malcolm in the Middle proved it wasn't. It's widely considered the first network sitcom to take that single-camera, no-audience cinematic approach and make it work for a broad audience in prime time. And the industry watched and learned and applied it to some of the biggest comedies of the past 20 to 25 years. Scrubs premiered in 2001 on NBC. The creators have explicitly cited Malcolm as a direct influence on how they structured the show. Scrubs would run for 9 seasons and win multiple Emmys. Arrested Development premiered on Fox in 2003. Same thing, single camera, no laugh track, voiceover narration. Mitchell Hurwitz was watching the same revolution Malcolm had started and built on it. Arrested Development is now considered one of the greatest comedies in television history. 30 Rock, It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia, The Bernie Mac Show, Everybody Hates Chris. Every one of them cited Malcolm's format as proof that single-camera comedies without laugh tracks could find audiences on network television. Before Malcolm, the conventional wisdom was that audiences needed the laugh track to know when something was funny. Malcolm killed that myth. And now there is a 4-episode revival, Malcolm in the Middle, Life's Still Unfair, where pretty much everyone came back except for Eric Persullivan. The 4-episode miniseries premiered on April 10th, 2026, and the revival is a reminder of just how special and authentic Malcolm in the Middle really was. But we've been getting reminders of that for the past 20 years. Every time you watch a sitcom without a laugh track and don't think anything of it, Malcolm did that. Every time a character in a comedy breaks the fourth wall and talks to you directly, Malcolm was doing it when no one else was. Every time a dysfunctional family on television feels real and messy and genuinely funny instead of sanitized and perfect and sitcom-shaped, you're watching what Linwood Boomer started in a writer's room in 1999 with stories about his crazy brothers and his naked mom and his father who hated mowing the lawn. If you enjoyed this deep dive, give the video a like and subscribe for more. Thanks for watching.